And there are just 100 days to go until Britain is due to leave the European Union. And with no sign of a deal on the horizon, businesses are becoming increasingly concerned about the prospect of a hard or no-deal Brexit. Theresa May's cabinet held a 3-hour meeting yesterday that was dominated by planning for a no-deal. But while they were talking, leading British businesses issued a cry of alarm, saying they were watching proceedings with horror. Well, for the very latest, I'm joined now from Downing Street by Vincent McAviney. Good morning, Vincent. Strong calls there from businesses. What are they worried about at this stage?
Good morning, Belle. Well, it's rare to get a statement like this from all the leading business organisations like the British Chamber of Commerce, the IOD, the Organisation of Small Businesses, all singing from the same hymn sheet. And they say in this statement, businesses have been watching in horror as politicians have focused on fractional disputes rather than practical steps that businesses need to move forward. The lack of progress in Westminster means that the risk of no-deal Brexit is rising. And they go on to say that that means that businesses are having to put money into no-deal plans being activated now, rather than investing in people, investing in products and services and things like that. They are now having to do this, which ultimately they might not need to use, but the money will have been spent. They're going on to say it is clear there is simply not enough time to prevent severe dislocation and disruption in just 100 days. This is not where we should be. So that is a strong message to those inside number 10 Downing Street, that business is very angry with them. The Conservative Party, traditionally the party of business, and the government actually wrote to 140,000 businesses last night urging them to activate their no-deal planning, and they're going to send out information packs on Thursday or Friday, we believe, to those businesses with more detail. But this, of course, will worry businesses, it will worry markets, and it's worrying European partners, particularly, of course, Germany, which has such a big business infrastructure here in the UK, with manufacturers like BMW present in the country. And the German Finance and Energy Minister, Peter Altmaier, said this about the situation that we're in now.
I believe nobody in Europe can afford hard Brexit. Hard Brexit would damage the economic interest of everybody, especially in the United Kingdom. My impression is that the British Parliament, British politics are struggling very seriously.
Now, the Prime Minister will have PMQs later on today. It's the last one of the year, so she might be quizzed about this business preparedness, about being in this no-deal scenario. And people themselves are starting to wonder what they need to do. We understand the government will be issuing some advice later in the week. And yesterday, the Health Secretary, in an interview, admitted he has now become the biggest buyer of fridges in the world at the moment, because he is having to buy more fridges to stockpile medicines, as there is a threat that they may run out in the no-deal scenario. And the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament, which overlooks all the spending and plans that governments do, say that the planning for medical supplies to ensure equipment and drugs are coming in is not at the standard that it should be at. So some real worries now for both businesses and people around Britain.
Well, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is in Brussels. Let's go straight to him for more on this morning. Good morning, Darren. As we've been hearing, Michel's resignation hasn't yet been accepted. Is that the next logical step here?
It may well be, or we may well see Charles Michel essentially stagger on till next May, Belle. That is because the King is talking to his advisers today to see what the next move should be, whether to accept this resignation or not. He will also be, of course, talking to other political parties. It seems unlikely that any other form of coalition can be built. There is still the possibility of a snap election in the new year. I'm sure many of the opposition parties, not least of all the NVA, may well be pushing for that. But I think at the moment the most likely scenario is, as I say, he will stagger on to the scheduled elections, which are due to be held on the 26th of May. Now, why is that? Well, as I say, it is unlikely that the political dynamics are going to change. Of course, Belgium is used to political uncertainty, but more importantly, there already are European and local elections scheduled for that date. So it would make, in some ways, just logistical sense to wait until the 26th. What it does mean, though, of course, is that Charles Michel may well remain as a caretaker Prime Minister with a pretty powerless government.
And all of this has really thrown into sharp focus the way that Europe is divided over this issue of migration, hasn't it, Darren?
Yeah, it really has indeed, and many people watching this, knowing about Belgium's political instability, will still be surprised that the government essentially has been brought down by a non-binding UN pact, this Marrakesh Migration Pact. It's been signed by, it should be said, most EU countries. Angela Merkel, Charles Michel, one of the few EU leaders to travel to Marrakesh to sign it. But many others, it must be noted, have not. I think countries including Poland, the Czech Republic, Italy and Hungary have not signed this. 164 across the world have, the United States included. Though, as I say, it is not a legally binding treaty. It is simply a statement of intent in many ways. Bell, but it is a sign of the depth of feeling about migration, particularly the Flemish National Party, concerned that even as a statement of intent, it would mean that essentially more migrants would come to Europe. And it is clear that just as 2018 is being marked by the divisions along this discourse of migration, it looks very similar that they will play a pretty big role in both national and European elections next year.
That was government spokesperson Zoltán Kovács there. Well, let's go to our correspondent Robert Csakányi, who's in Budapest this morning. Good morning to you, Robert. The turnout has been dwindling in these protests. So does that mean, as far as you're concerned, that people are giving up on this movement?
I've suddenly got 4 minutes over. Does anyone put a time in for it?
Good morning, Belle. Well, even the protesters were disappointed about the turnout of yesterday's demonstration at the Hungarian Parliament, the square of the Parliament at Budapest. But we have to add that that protest was organized by two individuals, not the opposition parties, unlike the protests in the recent days. But on the countryside, there were also some demonstrations yesterday in the evening with a couple of hundred, maybe 1,000 people at each town where there were protests organized. And you might say that that's not a huge crowd, but we are speaking about towns of 40, 60, 80,000 inhabitants. So if you look at town of 80,000 inhabitants with 1,000 protesters, that means like there would be 20 or 30,000 people marching in the 2.2 million Paris. So that's something to consider. Now, the protesters and their supporters are actually waiting for the next moves of the opposition parties, because now, after a long time, they proved at the public TV station that they can cooperate, they can protest together. But after they came out of that building, they ended their protest there. They did not really fold out their next step, and that's what everyone is waiting for. Now, several protests are announced, so the schedule is full for the next days. There's going to be a protest on Friday in Budapest. There's going to be another protest on New Year's Eve. Let's party through the new year and protest, something like that is the title. And there's also a protest for the 2nd of January at the Opera, organized by some group which already organized a huge protest 5 years ago. So the schedule is full, Belle.